The money was good, and the job was relatively easy. All I had to do was drive around the cemetery in my truck and make sure no kids were causing trouble. Every night felt the same, and by then I'd gotten used to the eerie quietness of it. After a normal shift, I'd get off around 6 a.m. and head home. I usually didn't go to bed until around 11. One morning around 10:30, just as I was finishing up my coffee, I got a call from my boss. He asked if I'd seen anything strange the previous night. I hadn't. Nothing at all. Then he told me that one of the graves had been defaced. I was stunned. I didn't see anything suspicious. No kids, no late-night visitors, nothing. Still, I agreed to meet him back at the site to help clean it up. Part of me felt responsible. When I arrived, I realized I'd underestimated how bad it was. This wasn't the usual graffiti or some small scratches. There were vulgar messages etched all over the gravestone, disgusting words, chaotic markings. But what hit me the hardest was the name on the grave. I won't say it for privacy reasons, but it belonged to a child, an 8-year-old who had passed away just a few months earlier. The sadness and anger that hit me were like nothing I'd felt before. Who could do something like that to a child's grave? My boss and I checked the surveillance footage, but the cemetery only had one old camera pointed at the small funeral building. It was useless. The place was too large to be covered with just that. The city brought in 2 extra watchmen after that. They worked with me from dusk till dawn. One patrolled with me, while the other stayed near the entrance. Weeks went by and nothing happened. I grew close to the guy who rode with me. We speculated about who the grave defacer might have been, but eventually, we figured it was a one-time thing. A sick person, a twisted impulse, and then nothing. The additional guards were eventually let go due to the inactivity. It was just, to me again, back to the same quiet nights, until one wasn't. One night, right after I began my shift, I drove all the way to the back of the cemetery and stepped out to begin my usual walk. The air was thick, foggy, and dead silent. As I walked closer to the area where the child's grave was located, something felt off. I stopped about 200 feet away. Even from that distance, something looked wrong. I stared for 30 seconds, my gut twisting slowly. I shined my flashlight into the dark, barely illuminating the area, and took a few cautious steps forward. 100 feet out, I paused again and raised my light. There was a figure lying on the ground next to the child's grave, completely still. I froze. Was it a dead body? Someone hiding? I crept forward. At around 50 feet, the figure suddenly leapt up and sprinted away into the darkness. Gone. Vanished among the headstones. I was rooted in place. My heart was pounding out of my chest. When I finally got control of myself, I sprinted back to my truck and called the police. Then I returned to the grave with my flashlight. What I found was disturbing. In front of the gravestone was a hole. Not deep, not wide, just a foot into the earth. But it had clearly been dug by someone's hands, fingers clawing at the soil. Someone had tried to dig up that child's grave with bare hands. We never found out who it was, but it never happened again. The city hired 2 new permanent guards after that. One always stayed near the child's grave. The other 2 roamed the grounds. They even started daytime surveillance. No ghosts, no creatures, just horrifying people. That was the worst thing I've seen while doing graveyard work. I work as a community patrol officer in a neighborhood just south of Las Vegas. Now, don't confuse it with being a cop. I'm not. I'm just a 25-year-old guy driving a little patrol vehicle around gated communities to make the residents feel safer. It's a pretty common job here, since there's a lot of high-end homes right next to some sketchy parts of the city. Part of the job includes reporting things like overgrown bushes, improper trash placement, the type of petty violations that come with living in places run by HOA dictators. Personally, I find it kind of weird that people pay money to live under those rules, but hey, it pays my bills. My shift usually runs from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. It's a weird schedule, but I'm used to it. For the most part, my patrols are uneventful, just teenagers smoking at the park or loud music from house parties. Until one night changed everything. It was around 10 p.m., quiet, calm, like any other mid-shift patrol. One of my tasks was to make sure the community pools were locked up for the night. I pulled into a small lot and walked toward the gate. The area was empty. I checked everything out, locked the gate, and turned back toward my car. That's when I noticed a man sitting on a park bench nearby. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, both hands in his pockets, head down, just sitting, still, silent. My first thought was maybe he was waiting for a dealer or something. He didn't look homeless, but he gave off that don't ask questions vibe. I ignored him and drove off. About an hour later, I finished my route and found myself passing by the pool again. The man was gone. Out of curiosity, I slowed down and scanned the sidewalks and nearby park, but there was no sign of him. The feeling I got, though, as I drove past that park, unease. Something wasn't right. I couldn't explain why. It just felt off. I kept moving until I pulled up to a stop sign and noticed a figure standing by the curb. Same hood, same posture, same man. He stepped forward like he was about to cross the street, then stopped halfway and turned to face me. Slowly, he walked up to my window. I cracked it open just a bit. He leaned in slightly. "Do you know where address is?" I didn't recognize the address. Could have looked it up, sure. But everything about the way he asked felt wrong. He had no emotion, no urgency. Just repeated the question in the exact same flat tone when I said I didn't know. I told him I had to leave, rolled up the window, and pulled away. I checked the mirror. He was standing in the middle of the road, staring at my car as it disappeared down the street. Something about it bothered me enough to pull over on a nearby street and think it through. I typed the address into my GPS. It was inside the same neighborhood, just a few blocks away. So I drove there. The house looked completely normal. Quiet, lights off. I parked across the street, just watching. 30 seconds later, the man appeared, walking down the sidewalk toward the home. I watched from my car as he walked up the driveway and knocked. Calm, still, mechanical. He waited, knocked again, and then, when the door opened, he lunged forward and slammed into the person standing there. He forced his way inside. I was in shock, just stunned. My fingers finally moved. I grabbed the radio, called the police, sat there, frozen, waiting. 2 minutes, no movement. 3 minutes, nothing. I kept debating whether to go in and try to help. But honestly, I was terrified. I didn't want to make things worse. Then the front door flew open and the man bolted out, sprinting, disappearing into the night. Cops didn't show up for another 10 minutes. The homeowner was unconscious, beaten so badly he had to be hospitalized, but nothing was stolen. He had no idea who the guy was. No recognition, no memory of the event, just pain. Whoever that man was, he came there for one reason, to hurt someone. Not for money, not for robbery, just violence. It's been a week. I still check every dark corner when I drive. I still wonder how he knew that address. And I still don't sleep right. I had just graduated and was taking full advantage of the summer before college. I picked up a full-time job at the high school I had just left, helping with maintenance, running errands, anything that would earn me some cash for the road ahead. My family had planned a trip to Virginia to visit my grandparents, but I opted to stay behind. I had already bought tickets for a concert happening the same day they were leaving. Besides, having the house to myself for a full week sounded like heaven. It wasn't. The first couple of days were great, quiet, peaceful. No one to tell me to clean my room or ask me to take out the trash. I even went out for some fried chicken one afternoon just because I could. On the way back, traffic on the main road was backed up due to an accident. I decided to take a shortcut. It was a rural detour surrounded by woods and patches of empty land. As I passed a rundown mechanic shop, I noticed a light flicker on. It wasn't a building, it was a car, an old one, only one headlight working. At first, I thought it was just someone heading home, but the car pulled out behind me, and stayed behind me, mile after mile. I started to get uneasy. I'm usually paranoid, but this felt different. The way the car mirrored every turn I took wasn't normal. I figured maybe it was just coincidence. Still, as I got closer to my neighborhood and the car was still tailing me, I really started to panic. To make matters worse, I was running low on gas. I had two choices: drive around aimlessly hoping to lose them, or head home and risk being followed directly into my driveway. I chose the latter. Better the devil I know than breaking down alone on a dark road. As I pulled into my street, the car with the busted headlight turned in behind me. My heart sank. I eased into the driveway, watching them closely. They followed, all the way up. At that moment, I felt a dread I didn't know was possible. I considered calling the police, but I was frozen, locked in a loop of anxiety and disbelief. I reversed slowly. They reversed too, blocking the driveway's exit. I pulled forward. They matched me again. We repeated this dance a few times until I finally surged forward fast enough to spin the car around and face them head on. I stepped out. My hand clutched a small pocket knife I always kept beside the seat. Not much, but it was something. My headlights illuminated the car in front of me. I couldn't see the driver clearly. I shouted, the car backed up, slowly, then parked down the street. I saw a figure exit the passenger side. I didn't wait. I ran inside and locked the door, every bolt, every chain. Then I heard the footsteps, fast, heavy, pacing around the outside of the house. A window shook violently as someone tried to force it open. I called 911, whispering into the receiver, shaking. I stayed crouched near the window, trying to hear what side they were on. I could hear them, walking, testing every door, every window, scraping, shuffling, breathing. I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. A few minutes later, the front door began to rattle, followed by loud pounding. The man was yelling now, but I couldn't understand the words. Just rage. Then came sirens. Two squad cars pulled into the driveway. And the man didn't run. He just stood there. They cuffed him, questioned him. He reeked of alcohol and something sour. They found no weapons, no tools, no ID, just a blank expression and a glazed look in his eyes. They said he was high, possibly both drunk and drugged. He never gave a clear reason why he followed me. He just kept repeating that he needed to get inside. I don't know what his plans were. I don't want to know. But I'm thankful I'll never have to see him again. I'm 29 now, but back in 2019, I had planned a solo hiking trip across a ridge in the Appalachian Mountains. My best friend usually joined me for these kinds of backpacking adventures. Days of hiking, camping, roughing it off the grid, but a last-minute work emergency pulled him out. I already had the time off, the gear packed, the trail mapped. I decided to go anyway. The trail I took wasn't recreational, no groomed paths or helpful signs. It was the kind where you use a compass, map, and visual landmarks, massive rock formations, distant peaks, to find your way. You hike until you reach one, then spot the next, and move again. Primitive, wild, beautiful. The first 2 days went well. I made steady progress toward a ridge that led to a lake at the top of the mountain. On the second night, I stopped to set up camp a few hours from the ridge. I got a small fire going, warmed up some food, and laid in my tent to read. Around 8 p.m., with the fire still crackling outside, I heard a sound. Sharp, deliberate. a stick snapping directly behind my tent. I froze. Black bears aren't uncommon out here, and my first thought was one had caught the scent of my food. I didn't hear anything else. No breathing, no movement. I slowly unzipped the tent, flashlight in hand, and shined it into the trees. Nothing. I called out, loud, firm, aggressive, to scare off any animals. Still nothing. No scurrying, no retreating, just the silent forest looking back at me. It didn't make sense. The sound had been distinct. It wasn't the wind or the fire, it was a footstep. I stayed outside for a while, scanning the trees, then put the fire out and went back in the tent. Sleep came slow. My ears were doing overtime, but somehow I made it through the night. The next morning, I packed up and continued toward the lake. I moved fast, wanting to reach it before dark. When I finally arrived, it was everything I hoped it would be. Peaceful, secluded. Still, I set up camp near the tree line and sat by the new fire, watching the last rays of sunlight flicker on the water. That's when I heard it again, soft, rhythmic, almost like footsteps, behind me, in the trees. I tried to convince myself it was in my head, that I was still shaken from the night before, but every few minutes, there it was again. Crunch, pause, crunch, just barely loud enough to make out. It continued until I went into my tent. I laid there, eyes wide open, waiting. Eventually, I must have dozed off, because I woke up to someone running. Fast, loud, right outside my tent. I scrambled out with the flashlight and caught the barest glimpse of a figure retreating into the trees. Human? No animal moves like that. When I looked down, my heart stopped. Footprints, all around my tent, circling it, like they'd been watching me, waiting for something. I got the fire going again, sat up all night, shaking. Nothing else happened. The next morning, I left. I'd planned to stay an extra day, but that wasn't happening now. As I hiked back, I noticed a few items missing from my backpack. Small things, some food, a couple tools, nothing huge. But the pack had been right next to me all night. I hadn't left it. Which means someone had been inside my tent while I slept. They reached right past me, took what they wanted, and walked away. Even now, I wonder what they were waiting for. And with that, we reached the end of part 1. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for part 2. You won't want to miss what comes next. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and make sure to turn on the bell icon so you're the first to know when the next part drops. Stay tuned for more thrills, and I'll see you in the next one.